Hello everybody, we're back here at the Juneau-Douglas City Museum in our collection storage area. We're following up a video a little bit about how a curator goes about handling objects and their day-to-day life here in the collection storage area. We're wanting to start a new film series on different objects in our collection. As many people probably know, or maybe you don't, most museums only have about 5 to 15% of their collections actually on display in their gallery space at any one time. So that means there are a large amount of objects down here, well, in whatever storage area they have it. At the Juneau-Douglas City Museum, most of our storage is downstairs. The main gallery is on the ground floor, and then where I live and work is down here in the basement. So this is where we keep the majority of our objects when they're not on display. And we do try and rotate our objects. It really just depends on the exhibits that we do. In the meantime, we're going to talk a little bit about this interesting object here in front of us. Excuse the gloves. So, Alyssa has not had time to research this. She doesn't know a whole lot about it off just me pulling it out of here. So I wanted to ask, especially for people who are watching, you guys have a think. What do you think this object is? Alyssa, what do you think?
Well, it's very unusual. It looks like it has about 4 different spouts up in front and a handle, and because it's metal, it kind of oddly reminds me of maybe, a coffee maker, but it doesn't make sense with all those spouts, so I'm wondering about some sort of oil dispenser. That's all I can think of.
I think that's a pretty good guess. Most people tend to guess some kind of teapot or some kind of kettle. And you're right, it does hold some kind of liquid. This is actually a surge milking machine.
Oh, what?
Exactly! So, surge milking machines were created in the 1920s, 1930s, and they were really meant to help dairy farmers who were basically having to milk by hand. There had been other products on the market from the late 1800s that used a lot of hoses and suction. They were very long, and they did cause a lot of trouble because those hoses would often fall off the cow teat and then would often suck up dirt, which would then contaminate the milk. So as a result, they weren't very efficient. A lot of dairy farmers didn't use them. And because of that, there was constantly people looking how to make that more efficient. Just in general, anything that's industrialized, we want to make it better, faster, more efficient, less staff, things like that. And if you've ever milked a cow, I don't think I have since I was younger, but it takes a long time and you need to have a lot of skill to do it. So because of that, companies were looking how we can capitalize on dairy farmers that might not want to spend hours out of their day milking, both in the morning and in the evening. Enter the surge milker. So what we don't have connected here to this object is there would be 4 rubber tubes that would connect here to these guys, and then there would be kind of cups that would then attach to the udders of the cow. And then using a vacuum tug and pull, it would suck out the milk in the same kind of motion as a person, or more closely related to how a calf would suckle on the udders of the mama cow. So it was much more sanitary because you only had about 4 inches of rubber hose that needed to be cleaned out. The cups themselves stayed better on the udders, and so the dairy farmers found that overall they were not falling off very often, sucking up dirt, and they were ending up with a lot more milk than they were before, especially just the kind of tug and pull of the vacuum itself then helped milk production. So these guys came onto the market and they were extremely profitable and extremely popular for up until about 1955. The company that owned the patent on it used it exclusively from the 1920s till 1955. And then they did, once their patent ran out, other companies began to replicate it because obviously it worked very well. Dairy farmers used it a lot. And then by about the 1960s, they started using more of the piping system of milking, which then made these guys a little bit more obsolete. They actually did continue production about until the 1990s, but this one in particular is from the 1940s. So it's made of stainless steel and is kind of one of the earlier models that they really just continue to remake because it works so well. The object itself, I wanted to tie a little bit into overall Juneau history. So something that's comes up a lot from people is asking about the dairy history here in Juneau. Not a lot of people realize, but we actually had a large amount of dairies from basically when the city began in the 1880s up until about 1965. So when gold was discovered here and people started flocking to the area, obviously more people, more demand. And so people were clamoring for for fresh dairy products, fresh eggs as well. And because of that, people who were emigrating here really saw an opportunity. Some didn't come out thinking they were going to be dairy farmers, but kind of fell into it. And so as early as the 1880s, we'd have our first dairy. There was a dairy on Chicken Ridge. Douglas had several small-scale dairies that would have 3 or 4 cows, and then the Douglas Dairy, which was a lot larger in 1909. By the 1920s is when the dairy farming kind of took off here in Juneau. The area in what we call now the valley, but Mendenhall Valley, was where most of them sprung up. There was a lot more land, it was flat, and was much more, can't think of the word. Conducive. Inexpensive.
Oh,
inexpensive than trying to buy something downtown. So they were able to buy large plots of land in that area that didn't have a lot of people. And they were largely self-sufficient. And those ranged from small-scale family operations to larger ones that would merge together mostly in the 1930s to create kind of larger dairy farms. The interesting thing about those dairies is really all of the people they serviced were downtown or in Douglas or Thane or the mines. So they actually had to transport everything from the valley to their clients in downtown mostly. They actually would even transport their dairy products to the AJ mill, which would then be transported through the mines, through the tunnels, to Last Chance Basin, where they would be served at the miners' mess hall. So, also went through the mountains. They kind of had a little bit of a rugged transport system out there. There weren't great roads, so in summer months and then months where there weren't heavy amounts of snow, they would drive open-sided trucks. In the wintertime, they would actually use horse-drawn sleighs to get out of that area and then into town. And those dairies that were on the northwest side of the Mendenhall River, actually up until the late 1920s, there was no bridge, so they had to transport everything by boat over the river and then through the woods to your grandma's house. So it really had a lot of effort. They also had to get most of their supplies from down south, which was could be really difficult, could be very expensive. If there are any longshoremen strikes or ship strikes in general, they wouldn't be able to get their hay, their feed. There's actually a story about an entire delivery of cows had to turn around and go back to Seattle because there was a strike and the dairy farmers couldn't even get their cows off the ship. So there was a lot of questionable possibilities. So you really had to be kind of tough to make it as a dairy farmer. By the 1940s is really when we started to get a lot more air traffic, and it became evident that they weren't going to last long term because it was cheaper to import just the products themselves rather than all of the products that you would need to maintain the cows and to maintain the equipment and maintain the staff. So the last dairy shut down in 1965, and now we don't have any in Juneau at the moment that I know of. Could be wrong, but you never know. And really, there's still that history and remnants of those dairies in the valley area. They sold off a lot of their land because it was so flat and great for subdivisions, airports, other buildings like that. But you can still find old barns and mill houses that have been converted into housing. So if you're out in the valley and you see a house that looks like a barn, there's a good chance it used to be one. So just a little bit about that hidden history of Juneau and the dairy farmers that worked so hard to get dairy to us. Now we kind of take it for granted that we can just go to Foodland or to Safeway or to Fred Meyer's and really pick up anything you need. Really, these people carved out a living for quite a long time doing a lot of hard work to get this to people. So interesting object. It's a good example of how something strange that you don't know anything about could lead you down a really great rabbit hole about weird things that you wouldn't think to look about or to research. I never really imagined I'd go, what about dairy farms in Juneau? But it actually has a really interesting history. So as we move forward, if everyone's stuck at home, please take a look at your curriculum, or even just look out your window. Is there a building you drive past every day that you go, what is that? Send us a message, and we'll see if we can figure it out for you. All right, so thank you guys for tuning in and for joining us here in the collections area. We're going to keep bringing you videos as long as we can, and hopefully get you some other ones with a little bit more about Juneau history. Thank you guys for watching.